Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, John Hubbard, shareholder here at Boomer Consulting, and with me today is Jim Boomer. Hi, Jim.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Jim is our CEO and has been so for how many years, Jim?
Let's see. I think we're going on year 5.
Year 5 or so. All right. So Jim has been our CEO for over 5 years now. And over those 5 years, we have definitely seen a shift and an evolution in the marketplace. And Jim is very in tune with that, which kind of tees up our topic here, which is how to adapt to the new normal. And so if you're a business leader out there, or if you're just a leader in general of an organization and you're thinking, what does the future look like and how can I best adapt and lead in this new normal, then this conversation is for you. So Jim, just to tee up the first question, why is it important from your perspective for firms or leaders to figure out how to adapt to the new normal?
Well, I think this past year has highlighted it more than any that I can remember. But even beyond what 2020 and into 2021 has thrown at us, it is throwing at us. You always need to be preparing for not necessarily the new normal, but the next normal. What's coming next, and especially as we come through this pandemic, which we will. There's elements of the past that are going to come through. But there are also things that are not going to be like it was before. And, I hear time and I want to just get back to normal. Well, it's not going to look the same. And in reality, like I said, in normal times, it's never the same as it was the previous year. So we always have to be preparing for the future and looking at where are our biggest dangers and how do we develop strategies to limit those dangers or turn them into opportunities. What are our opportunities that for us to capitalize on in the given year? And then what are the strengths that our organization has that we can leverage to address both those dangers and opportunities? So in a normal year, you should be doing that anyway, but it's become even more important here in this last year as we prepare to come out of this pandemic and recognize that we're coming back to a work environment that doesn't look like what we exited back in March.
Right. And normal is a little bit of a deceiving word too when we think about this conversation, because the normal you and I are living in right now was not normal for the generation before us and the generation before that. So normal is just inherently a shifting thing. And so that's why I like your opening remarks there so much, because as you are doing, the dangers, opportunities, and strengths evaluation and having conversations with those in your organization about what they're seeing, it's really going to make sure you are always staying close to shifting into that new or next normal. So related to that, you mentioned, we call that the DOS, right? Dangers, opportunities, and strengths. But what other solutions do you have for organizations or for leaders that are trying to adapt to the new normal? Any advice for them?
Well, I'm gonna go back to like the foundation of being prepared to thrive in the next normal, and the ability to thrive in usual times, I guess. And we talked about this in a previous podcast when we were talking about growth mindset, but the primary tool, and we use it at Boomer Consulting, is going through a regular visioning session, paint that picture of what you want to be, where you want to be as an organization, and then committing to the strategic planning process. Not looking at it as an event you do once every 3 years, but it is an iterative process. You may do strategic planning once a year, but you need to be holding yourselves accountable, reviewing that, tweaking your strategy based on how things change, and as new information comes, as the market shifts, as technology changes, you need to be going through that process to better prepare yourself to be able to make adjustments and change on the fly. So that's where I would start in terms of tools. A couple things that, when we think about what is our work world gonna look like when we come back, a few things that I would say are very important. One is we need to recognize that remote work is here to stay. Um, you talked about what's normal may look different among generations. It also is going to look different organization to organization. You and we've been doing this virtual work thing for pre-pandemic for many years, and our organization is primarily virtual. So from a day-to-day perspective, not a lot changed. Now, in terms of interaction with our clients, a lot of that changed. And so we did have to adjust. But to think that when the vaccine is widely distributed, and we feel like we're in the safe zone, that everybody's just going to come back to the office is I don't believe it's a reality. The flexibility in the workplace and remote work was already a hot topic, and this has already amplified it, but it's also proven out that it can work. And it's taken away one of the biggest hurdles, is the naysayers that say that it can't work. So that's one thing I would say, is you gotta recognize that remote work is here to stay. I think as leaders, it's critical to maintain a positive mindset. Again, when we talked in a previous episode about growth mindset, I talked about how the tone is set at the top, and we've heard that a lot, but it's so true. And positivity is huge to success. And so, I've mentioned we faced a lot of challenges in 2020 and going into 2021, and it's easy to sort of retreat into your shell and woe is me and focus on all the bad things that have happened. We have to pull ourselves out of that as leaders and celebrate the good things that happen, the silver linings, the things we learned, the things we did to prepare ourselves for the future. And that in and of itself starts to become contagious, and others in our organization become more positive and start to be able to break out of their shells and see the light in the future, that we can be successful. And so maintaining that positive mindset is huge. Part of that is not putting a stop to planning for the future. So yes, we've had to dedicate resources to be able to respond on a dime and change things in the now, and go into protection mode in some areas. But if that's all your focus is on, then your strategy is really short-sighted. And for a lot of organizations, that's going to mean their organization is short-lived. So we have to continue to force ourselves out of that defensive mode and start to look at the offensive mode and proactive, and start committing to strategic planning, to improving our processes, investing in new technologies and automation, and developing our people, so that when we do come out of this, we can frankly leapfrog competition that just focused on how they're going to survive. And then the last thing I'd say is, get outside of your four walls, learn from other people. I've talked in the past and written a lot about the power of the peer network. We put these on, yes, but we also participate in these every year, pre-pandemic. And it's so important to hear what others are having successes in, and even where they're having challenges, because you can learn from that. But if you just rely on your own organization, it's extremely limiting to your thinking, your ideas, and what's possible for your organization now and in the next normal.
Well, I love everything you said there. One thing, you touched on is that whole positive mindset piece. And when you think about, if you were to ask any leader, would you want your team to have a positive mindset? Probably 100% people would say yes, absolutely. But it's actually, that's the easy question. The hard question is, do you have a positive mindset, and are you promoting a positive mindset within an organization? That's the more challenging question, because, there is, in all fairness, a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations for leaders and organizations, right? To steady the ship, create focus, create direction. And, in some ways it might be a thankless job in some instances, but it's so important for that leader of an organization, of a team, of a department to really be promoting that positive mindset there. And Jim, you touched on a couple of the benefits, already of kind of adapting to the new normal. What positive results have you seen organizations that, they have a vision and plan in place, they're looking to the future, they're evaluating their dangers, opportunities, and strengths. Where do you see them experiencing success specifically?
Well, I touched on several of them. I mean, I think that the leading firms did celebrate the successes and recognize the silver linings in this challenging year. So some examples would be, I think firms have used the PPP loan discussions and conversations as a launch pad to recognizing we can talk to our clients during tax season beyond just tax planning and what the final verdict is on your tax return. Like, we can have exploratory conversations about how we help you in your business. And so those firms that got people that were maybe scared to take that leap, comfortable with having those conversations, are now building upon that and recognizing it's not just we need to do this during tax season or outside of tax seasons. It's we need to have these conversations on a regular basis. That's allowing them to provide services to their clients that go deeper and frankly are the things that business owners want rather than what they have to have. And those are a whole lot more valuable to the client base. The other thing that I think a lot of successful firms did, and I mentioned it earlier, is continuing to invest in your organization and your people. So they, if your team had a lot of travel that took place or was out on client sites a lot, there was a lot of time that was back from commuting to those locations. And those firms that invested that time in professional development, not just technical CPE, but building your team's leadership skills, their ability to deliver higher value services, all those things, were really the winners in this. Beyond people, investing in the technology and the process improvements that could streamline, automate things. Successful firms didn't close up shop and stop investing during this time. They used it as an opportunity to prepare themselves to, as I said before, leapfrog the competition when they come out of this.
Right. And I also know, kind of like, internally, as you talk about people, a lot of the kind of forward thinking firms are seeing this whole topic of remote working is really exciting, because it just blew open the doors for the ability to attract and retain amazing talent.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of just really pushed them forward and saying, we can get the best talent for our firm all over the country now,
Yeah.
right? All over the world potentially. And so that's real exciting as well. As you think about outside the accounting profession, Jim, and adapting to the new normal, are there any industries you're paying attention to that seem to be kind of accelerating during this time, that are adapting more quickly to the new normal, or just maybe a broader question, just outside the accounting profession, how do you see this topic being approached?
Um, okay, I'm going to go back to your last comment first before I answer this question. So, you know, in terms of the remote work and expanding the talent pool that you can select from, yes, 100% agree. That is exciting. I think from a financial management of your organization, especially if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, where salaries tend to be much higher, you've now also opened yourself up for very talented resources that come at a fraction of the cost. And so that's another angle on it. And even before the pandemic, we saw, especially in California, firms trying to tap into that Midwest talent pool because the cost of resources was so high in California. So that was just one thing I wanted to comment on there. Now, your question is outside the accounting profession, where are we seeing, what industries highlight this whole concept of preparing for the next normal? And that's a hard one because I think everybody has had to adapt. And from travel companies, I think about some of the, like an organization like Airbnb. Their business was was dependent on people going somewhere, not staying in their home, sheltering in place. They were traveling. So you and I saw how Airbnb pivoted. They said, we can't have them come to us for the experiences. How can we take the experiences to them in virtual? And they did quite well developing their Airbnb experiences during our team days for our strategic planning. We had several of them. So we were joined by people from a chef from Mexico, a chef from Italy. We had a entertainment group out of Portugal that joined us. So, that would be one example. I think restaurants have had to adapt, obviously, and it's become harder as the weather's gotten colder in many parts of the country. But adapting to more on the go models and outdoor seating. And so I look around, I drive around here in Kansas City, and I see how the outdoor seating has expanded, how some of the fast food places that had dine-in areas are now just merely carry out or drive through. And you can just go down the list, but tech has had to pivot, but they've always had to do that because someone's going to take over your business and do it a different way, do it a better way, even in pre-pandemic times. So it doesn't really give you one example. It just gives you a few, but I would say it's across the board. Everybody has, in each industry, there have been winners and there have been losers. And when I look at the winners, what I see is they didn't go in their shell and just become reactive and protective. They continue to invest and plan and prepare themselves for the future. And they're thriving now, and they'll continue to thrive once we've put this pandemic behind us.
Yeah, I agree. And one component that I think ties together a lot of the industry examples you just shared, Jim, is think about how much more we're on our phones now, requesting those services, right? Probably pre-pandemic, there was probably a good portion of people that never ordered food off their phone to be delivered to their house. Well, now that's happening. Amazon, grew a huge amount in 2020, right? Online delivery. Airbnb, can you have this experience on your phone? Can you book that experience on your phone? Things of that sort. So I think there's a whole mobile component that, even though we have been more sheltered in place and stuck at home, our increase of use of mobile devices to get the services we need has skyrocketed. And I think about, for our profession, specifically in accounting, how does the experience a customer have with us mimic or at least compare to the experiences that our customers are able to have or our clients are able to have with other service providers out there. So I think that's an interesting conversation that will take place, a lot in 2021. But speaking of a kind of those, well, you talked about those other industries, um, you know, already, but if someone's listening here and they're thinking, all right, we need to adapt to the new normal. We need to get moving on this. I like what Jim is saying here. What's the best first step you think someone could take?
Well, I feel like I'm a broken record when I'm asked about the next step in a lot of topics, and but it's so true. Here, I'm going to say, if you don't have a vision and a strategic plan, that's your first step. You need to figure out where you're going, but that also forces you to analyze the market dynamics that you need to be preparing for and planning for, and in some cases responding to. If you do have that, then I would take, and you didn't take the time during the last several months to just step back and do a bit of a pivot plan and look at your strategy and your vision and go, how challenge yourself on how are things going to be different and what are the things that we need to do, then I would recommend that you do that. Um, it all comes down to planning and preparing, and that's going to drive. I talked about investment. Well, you don't want to just invest for investment's sake. You want to invest where you think the biggest return is going to be. And without doing that planning and strategizing, it's hard to zero in on where those investments are going to best be served. So that would be number one, is commit to developing your plan. If you have a plan, dedicate the time, resources, energy to look at it with a keen eye on what needs to change and how the world looks different as we move forward.
Absolutely. And for those listening, if you're thinking, well, how do I actually create a strategic plan? Go to boomer.com, scroll down to the very bottom of the homepage, and we have a guide to strategic planning that literally outlines exactly the steps you need to take in creating a strategic plan. That's at boomer.com, the very bottom of the homepage. And one thing that's interesting, and I think it's really valuable, especially even though we always say this, outside of, a pandemic, during a pandemic, um, as we are now, it's even more important to have an outside facilitator. So whatever industry you're in or niche you're in or kind of focus you're in, having an outside facilitator that can help challenge you and provide that third party viewpoint can just be really helpful in pushing your thinking forward. And Jim, as you know, we have 7 individuals here at Boomer Consulting that do strategic planning. Yet when we do our own strategic planning, we bring in an outside facilitator to challenge us.
Mhm.
And it's just really valuable to kind of have that sounding board. So you don't end up in a fixed mindset or just, stick with what's comfortable always. So I think that's excellent advice there, Jim.
The
So
only other thing, John, that I would add there is, beyond pushing and challenging you, the other thing to think about, and the reason that we bring in an outsider, is if you're going to do it yourself, most people are going to select one of their people that are a leader, that are a strategic thinker, to facilitate it. And facilitating a strategic plan is not the same as being a participant in a strategic plan. So the downfall for us was always, we're going to take one of our strategic thinkers out of the process and lose value there. And it's way more, the incentive or the payoff is there to bring someone else in to, as you said, John, challenge us, but keep our strategic thinkers all focused on the process and contributing.
that's so true. So Jim, as we wind down our conversation, I know you're constantly writing, putting out, information on social media. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Well, I think the two primary avenues are Twitter and LinkedIn. My handle on both of those is Jim Boomer, no spaces, no dots. Pretty pretty simple handle there. So I am pretty active on both. And so if you want to reach out, that's a good place to find me.
Awesome, Jim. Well, Jim, as always, this was a great conversation. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Absolutely. And for those listeners here, just a reminder, we release a new episode every Tuesday morning. So stay tuned for next Tuesday for our latest episode. Thanks so much. Bye.